Okay, well, it's 4 o'clock. So first of all, welcome everybody. My name's Sunil Wijayasekara. I'm the moderator for this session. Today's session is a question and answer session. We're very fortunate in having Reverend Lynn Kerr from Unitarian Congregation of Flint and Reverend Alex Holt, who experienced transition ministry, here to answer your questions on how to make your congregation successful. Before we start, a couple of requests. Please mute yourself unless you're speaking. This reduces background noise and makes the experience better for everyone. Second, if you have a question, and this is a question and answer session, please use the React button. Service. Please use the React button on your screen to raise your hand. I would ask you keep your questions brief and to the point, which allows time for Lynn and Alex to answer your questions. So before we get to questions, I will start with introductions, and I'm going to introduce myself first. Sorry, I'm the moderator for the session. I've been a UU since the mid-'80s, have attended congregations in Michigan and California. I've been president of the congregation a number of times. I've been involved in 2 building campaigns, and I've negotiated with Wayne Clark of the UA for a building loan. I was president of the congregation when we transformed from a lay-led fellowship to a full-time minister. I was also on my district board and chaired the extension committee, which is the committee responsible for growth in the district. And one experience I was part of was a program, some of you may remember it, it was called Religion That Puts Its Faith in You. I think the title is ironic given the current attitude of the UUA. This was a joint program between the UUA, the local district, and local churches. Churches had to sign up and attend training in attracting and retaining members. And in return, the UUA subsidized advertising in the local district. So that was a great example of how to encourage growth in a district. So with that introduction, I'm going to ask Lynn to introduce herself next, and then Alex.
Okay. All right. Hi, everyone. I am at the UU Congregation of Flint, and we are in our 93rd year right now, and I'm about to retire. We are retiring. My husband and I are the co-ministers, and so we have one full-time job that we share as ministers, and we'll be retiring at the end of May. So this is my last hurrah, but I'm hoping to continue to do some consulting, and that is what I did previously to doing parish ministry. When I first went to seminary in the early 90s, I planned on doing organizational development, and I learned organizational development from Reverend Clark Olson. He was my advisor and my mentor, and I'm very proud of that. So then I have been a chaplain for a hospice. I've been a ministerial settlement rep. I have been a consultant for organizational development through the UUA and also from myself privately. And I worked at the UUA for 3 years as the director of donor relations. And basically what that meant is I went all around the country raising money for the UUA. That seems like a whole nother lifetime ago. But of late, I have done religious education and parish ministry around the country. And Flint will be our last stop.
Thank you, Lynn. Alex, would you introduce yourself?
Thank you, and it's good to see you all here. Mostly I did transitions ministry with one exception, not a very successful exception, but I did transitions ministry for about 25 years. And my last position before I retired was in Meadville, Pennsylvania, which is now going to be celebrating their 200th anniversary, their bicentennial next week. And we got through some pretty intense times around COVID. And I've been all over the United States and learned a lot in the last certainly 15 years about transitions work and how smaller congregations. I was never interested in large congregations, and that's true, to this day. I'm a recovering alcoholic. I helped to start the UUA Addictions Ministry, which I think is still in existence, and a number of other projects for the UUA before I resigned from the UUMA, Unitarian Universalist Ministers Association, back in 2021 because of the way they were treating my colleagues. And I decided it was time to retire. So that's pretty much all I've got. It's nice to see you all.
Okay, so thank you. And just a reminder, if you have a question, would you raise your hand? And while we're waiting, I guess I'll use my prerogative to ask the first question. I'm going to ask Alex a question first because Alex, you've always said that one of the most common questions you get is about resource allocation, and it often shows up as, what do I do first? Hire a minister or build a building? Could you elaborate on that issue of resource allocation and how congregations prioritize?
Well, given that I'm a minister, I would, of course, default to, well, of course, you have to get a minister first. But I don't think there's one right way. And for some congregations, getting a building or getting a store space or something which puts them sort of on the map, I think is really, really important, simply because it gets you a geographical, physical location. And having a building or having a space that you can use, not just on Sundays, but during the week, I think is a very important place to call home. The advantage of getting a minister, well, of course, ministers, as we tend to know, are fairly expensive if you're going to hire one. The good thing is that they are from the outside, and usually they will be able to have insights about how the congregation is faring, how it's growing. It'll be a voice for the larger community and so on. So personally, I don't think there's one right way. It really depends on the congregation and where you want to go first. I mean, there's something to be said about having your own home. I mean, a couple of Sundays ago, I was at a place in northern Washington State, and they meet at a United Methodist Church, and they do a great job. But my guess is that in the future, they're going to want to look for their own space that they can use to their benefit, because I think the only time is Sunday. So that's my long answer to your short question.
Thank you, Alex. And I have a question for Lynn, but I'm going to encourage people to raise their hand too and ask questions. But my first question for Lynn is, you've talked about your role in training lay ministry teams. And I think that's very interesting to the group because a lot of us don't have full-time ministers and we're looking
Right.
for a way to do pastoral care. So could you talk about that? And
Yeah. So way back when I lived in the Boston area, I was part of a group of three ministers, three of us, and we used to do a district-wide, of course, this is when we had districts, right? We had a district-wide training that we did about 3 times a year for lay ministers in congregations, people who wanted to do pastoral care, but wanted some training. And rather than having each individual congregation, despite, whatever size they were, have to have all of their resources just in their church, it was a chance for us to have a group of 50 people come together on a Saturday. We spent the day learning together. And basically, not everybody had to reinvent the wheel. So what we did is we planned these lay ministry trainings for any congregation member who wanted to join, as long as their minister sort of, said, please, I want these people trained. And then once they went back to their congregations, then they decided what the framework would look like. But we did sort of the nitty gritty How do you sit with a person who's dying? What do you do when you go to a hospital? Some of it was really practical stuff, and some of it was more, intuitive kinds of things. And we did, the worst thing people hate, role playing. We did a lot of role playing, but people really enjoyed it, and felt much more confident about what they were going to go out and do. And what it was really helpful for were those congregations that were small and did not have ministers in place. And so they really were relying only on their lay folk to do the pastoral care. And I had mentioned when we were getting ready for this session that, this is maybe something that NAUA can think about, is that we could do a Zoom kind of training for those small congregations that need something like that. My husband and I are actually this weekend starting our training of our lay ministers, because we want to get some ready in case our search is not successful and they don't replace us right away. That's one of the things we want to get in place. But it's important to have them whether you have ministry or not. Ministers cannot do it all, even if you do have a minister. So, and there's just a lot of nuances to pastoral care. And I think ministers are, we've supposedly been trained in this to know, what you're supposed to do. And I think it's just helpful to have a few people that have done it before and then train a group of people, and then they shared experiences. And so we had people that had a lot of experience, had done it for years, but came to the training and then shared with other people. And we hooked people up with mentors, and so that they didn't have to always go to their minister for help. They could, call somebody down the road or a church down the road and talk to their mentor if they were having trouble with, just dealing with whatever it is they were doing pastorally. So that's a long answer too, but.
Thank you, Lynn. And that's a great point that as you're thinking about this session, I'm asking you to give us ideas of what you think the NAUA should do to help you or your congregation. Also, I just want to mention, if it wasn't clear, in order to raise your hand, there's a react button at the bottom of your screen, and you have to use that to raise your hand. And Danny has raised his hand, and so I'm going to go to him next. Thank you, Danny. Go ahead.
Thank you, Sunil. I have a couple questions that spring up as I listen to that fascinating narration from Lynn. And these have to do with some bad personal experiences I've had in just a few years in the UU. Why would a minister be deciding who gets pastoral care training? And a related question, why not train all called to this ministry by the love that holds us?
Mm-hmm. Those are good questions that you're poking me a little, and that's good. So the answer to the first question is, if a congregation has a minister, a lot of times and this is just the structure that we used, a lot of times the minister is sort of the person that would assign people to go see different folks in the congregation. Okay. They'd be kind of the point person. So they'd say, oh, who would really be good to go see so-and-so in the hospital. And so they're the point person. If we open up the training to anybody who comes in, and then we feed those people back to the minister, and the minister says, this is a person that, I can't see in this role, or whatever it is. We have to be practical. Not everyone can do pastoral care. We all have gifts. We don't all have gifts in pastoral care. And I truly believe that. So that's the answer to that in terms of ministry. And your second question relates to that too. I think for the most part, most people can do pastoral care. I think it does work. And for congregations that don't have ministers, I think you almost have to be open. But I also know, for instance, in my own congregation, I have, we're doing a special training on people with severe mental illness. we have had some really interesting things happen in our congregation that have, I mean, the police had to be called at one point. And so when you have situations like that, people, you have to have people who you feel can handle it, right? Who feel like they can handle it. So we want to make sure that the people that decide they want to do this work really can do it, that maybe they've had some experiences in the past and certain things are going to trigger something. That's okay, but they need to be aware of those feelings and they need to be aware of those triggers. And so that's why training is essential. And a lot of times what happens in training is people then realize, you know what, I don't think this is for me. And I've already had people come up to me in our congregation and say, you know what, I've read what the training's going to be about, and I don't think I can do it. I would love to do it, but I don't think I'm ready. So I don't know. Did that answer your question at all?
Yes and no.
Okay, keep
I
going.
have another one at this point, and it's this, it's very clear to me that you're assuming you're starting with idiots and that you need to train people from the ground up. Or that's how it sounds the way
Okay.
you expressed it.
Sure.
And for a person who comes in with considerable depth of experience in these fields, frankly, that's insulting. And that's what I
Okay.
experienced.
Okay, well, thank you for that, for being honest. Yes, and you're right. There are people that do come in with lots of experience. We have a number of people who are counselors, psychiatrists, psychologists for a living. And that's a whole different, I think that's a whole different matter. I guess I'm looking more at people who have no experience and are stepping completely outside their comfort zone. They're doing something they've never done before. But no, I'm not. I didn't mean to sound like that, so I apologize. Not starting out as idiots at all. No, you is an idiot that I've met. But I think that there are people that are within our congregations that can do the training. That's the other thing.
Lynn, this is how we're losing people and losing competent people. Until this kind of stuff is resolved, either in NAUA or UU, I will not volunteer again because of how I was treated.
Okay.
And I have massive experience, in a whole bunch of things, which we won't go into here.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let me give you an example. In our congregation, we have a psychologist. That's what she does for a living. She does social work, and she runs our grief group once a week. And it's open to the community. She gets 7, 8 people. So in no way do we have any issue with a layperson running groups, training people. Not at all. I think it's wonderful that she'll do it.
That's the same thing the UUA said, and they were lying. They were the opposite of what they said.
Okay,
Danny,
well,
Understand, I'm hinky now.
Danny, I'm sorry. Can we? I'm sure that Lynn would be happy to talk to you after the
oh, for
session.
sure. Yeah.
But I would love to
somewhere
get a
else?
couple more questions in. It's a
Gotcha.
very important discussion, so I'm not totally cutting you off. But
It is.
Roy, would you like to ask your question? Please unmute yourself.
Yeah, so like here in Northern California, there's not a lot of people. I think in Northern California there might be 25 or 30 people total across from like Paso Robles north. So it's the idea of a I think it's great, the idea of us getting this place, but it's kind of not feasible, and having a regular minister is really not feasible at this point. But what we really could use, I think, is support and being able to access ministerial services. For maybe somebody would like to get married, or maybe we have unfortunate death, or just services in general. So I was wondering, is there a move to get like a pool of ministers to access for support?
Alex or Lynn, do you want to address that question, or how we might set up a pool? Or I don't know if we have one, but
Yeah, I mean, we haven't, I'm pretty new to NAUA. Our congregation just joined not that long ago. However, I do think it's important that we do offer resources, the ministers that are part of the organization, ministers that are available. And the other thing is you don't necessarily have to be a minister to, for instance, perform a marriage or to do a memorial service. For a marriage, you do have to have a certificate, but what you can do is your governing body, your congregation can vote to give someone the privileges to do marriages within the congregation. So that's something that I think NAUA could probably help with those congregations that are a little bit more isolated. But at the same time, I think there are a lot of ministers out there that, are retired or live in areas you may not even know. There might be some near you that you don't even know of that may be looking for something. And I think we should really have kind of a pool of folks that are available all across the country. I think that is something that will happen. It's not in place right now. But as I said, there are ways to get the resources. The other thing is, I think most of us, at least I know I have been very willing to share resources like words for weddings, words for memorial services, share those with lay people so that they can use them. I don't feel like we have to hang on to them and, oh, they're the minister's property. I think sharing those with congregations who maybe don't have a minister is really helpful.
So I note that Judy Durham is on, and I think she's head of member services. She may have some input on that issue. So we'll
Great.
get to her in a minute. Did you want to say anything, Alex?
Well, I remember in the old days, and I don't know, since the district's dissolved, I have no idea what's going on now, but we used to have pulpit supply names, a
Yeah.
whole list. And then people from lay-led congregations or the congregation that needed to have a minister speak could go to that and contact the person. And it's somewhat easier now with Zoom because now we're not limited to geographical distance. So I think having NAUA have a resource base like that would be a great idea. And also wedding materials and maybe even pastoral care materials.
And I'm going to go to Judy next. And sorry, Bruce, you've been very patient. I'll get to you. Go ahead, Judy.
Thanks very much. Yes, member services is already been tasked by our NAUA Strategic Planning Implementation Committee to train more lay leaders. And so that is a task that the Member Services Committee will be taking on. And this is the kind of thing that exactly what you're talking about is what we plan to provide more and more trainings about, how to run that service for, one of your parishioners who has passed on, and how do you provide the pastoral care for, both the family and the person who is, near death, et cetera. Plus how to do weddings and, how to do the fun stuff as well, plus how to do worship services. So the whole gamut, because with the shortage of ministers, there will need to be more and more lay people who stay, who are able to stand up and do the kinds of things that ministers typically have done.
Thank you, Judy. And Bruce, you've been so patient. Go ahead and ask your question.
Well, I'm always happy to defer to Judy. She has brings a lot to any table, I'm sure. But first, an observation. I'll make that two observations. My fellowship's existed for over 70 years. We've never had a minister. We've never seen a need for one. We do our own burials. We do our own marriages. So what I'm interested in is professional training, and I'm shocked there's a question about that. I mean, and I certainly, Judy and I'll be talking about this further in member services. Definitely, we want training. the question about ministers, that's probably worth a program. Why do we need a minister? But that's not the program for here. I would really like to stress that the professional training and for lay leadership, and let's talk about facility issues and making money. If you're building a church, you better have a fundraising component built into it. Your church has got to earn revenue. That's
Yep.
how we survive, and I don't know how any church doesn't survive. It used the old universalist. The universalists were never ashamed to put a storefront at the front of their church. So we should take a lesson from our universalist predecessors, and if you're going to build a church, figure out how it's going to make you some money. Just some observations. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. It brings up two things. As we go through this discussion, when we talk about training, it would be helpful for people to specify what type of training they would like to see. So think about that question. And then I'm just going to open up the question of fundraising to either Alex or Lynn. What kind of ideas do you have around that?
Go ahead, Alex, if you wanted to.
Well, one of the lessons that I learned over time in various places is that yard sales and garage sales are fun the first year, and then they get overwhelming because the amount of work that has to go in to getting it organized, and of course, you know, all the goods and so on, and then versus the amount of time it takes and the amount of money that's made. Fundraisers, as I remember a congregational minister saying one time, aren't worth the time and energy. Now, I don't think that's totally true because I've been to some churches, congregations, fellowships where they've had annual auctions or auctions every 2 years. And those tend to be a lot of fun. And it actually makes quite a bit of money too. And it's a good community building event. But a lot of fundraisers, they have a lot of energy taken in to get it done. And I'm not sure how much money is made out of them. But again, it depends on the fundraiser. And it also depends on the congregation.
And Lynn?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that a lot of congregations have like bigger spaces and they think, oh, we have to move into a smaller space because we can't afford the bigger space. So renting your space or sharing the space with a nonprofit or something like that is a really good way to increase your revenue. Something that we have, which we're really lucky, but it is possible to get, is if you have land, you can get a cell tower. They still are building cell towers. They're still using them. We make a lot of money every year from our cell tower. We make a lot of money from our rentals. We have a lot of wedding rentals. We have a lot of birthday, retirement party, etc. We also, every day of the week, we have 2 AA groups that meet at different times during the day. We don't charge them a lot, but it helps with our revenue stream. So there are a little bit more unconventional ways to raise some money within your congregations. We also have concerts. And because during COVID, we invested in some pretty good, sound equipment and technical equipment. Some people come and rent some of that equipment to do some small productions and things like that. So that's another option. And then I did want to address the other thing about, why do you need a minister? And I wanted to say, you don't always need a minister. I mean, I know I'm a minister saying that, but it is true. Not every congregation does. I will be perfectly honest. The congregation that I'm serving right now, 4 years was without a minister, and they did fantastic. There are good lay speakers, there are good professors, there are all kinds of professionals out there who can do really good services. I think sometimes the only thing that you need if you don't have the minister is maybe those resources like the opening words and the closing words and what kind of music do you choose? Because maybe if somebody's coming in from a university and they don't know that, that Unitarian stuff, but they have the good, they have a really good spiel, a really good speech. So you might need to fill in around. But no, I don't think you have to have a minister, and you're proof. Who was that? Bruce. You're proof 70 years without. You don't have to have one. And lots of groups do better without. It's very true. So I think it depends on where you are and the makeup of the group and how much energy you have too.
It does bring up a question, and I will do that, and then I'll get to David in a minute. But if you don't have a minister, is it helpful to have a consultant or somebody on hand that can help you with specifics?
Can I answer that question?
Yeah, go ahead, Alex.
One place I was at fairly recently does a dynamite job with their Sunday services. But there are a number of little details that I asked them, why do you do it this way? And it was, well, we've always done it that way. So we had to come up with creative ideas without me kind of pushing them around, of saying, okay, are there some other ideas? I'll give you one example. A lot of visitors to our congregations who don't have prior experience with Unitarianism, Universalism, have no idea what lighting a chalice is all about. They literally do not know. And they want, what is this ritual about? Why is it so important? And one congregation I was at, when they lit the chalice every Sunday, they explained the history of it in just a couple of sentences. But it's the kinds of things that we are used to that an outsider might not be. And sometimes, and yes, even a minister can help with that sort of situation.
Thank you, Alex. And now I'm going to let David, please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Thank you. So, two comments. The first one is I used to love to travel, and when I did, I would visit other UUs. And here's one thing I observed in towns or places that had smaller fellowships. And I'm talking about St. Augustine Beach, Florida, and I'm talking about Lafayette, Louisiana. That both of those places at the particular time where I visited partnered with, I think it's the Liberal Reformed Jews. And they either leased or they rented that building because, as you know, the Jews' Sabbath is on Saturday. The UU services would be on Sunday. And so they shared costs for a building because each of them didn't have a lot of memberships, but combining, they were able to have power to then purchase or lease a place. The second comment is that when I look back on the history of religion, particularly in America, they had circuit riders or preachers that would go out and travel. And I grew up in a rural area in Wisconsin. And as a kid, I was just used to, we had so-and-so right out of seminary, but in a year they're gone. I was used to turnover. And I'd like to have a comment from both of the reverends on what they think about several preachers or reverends sharing a circuit and kind of having flex between 2 or 3 people on, this Sunday you go here and this Sunday you go there, and see if that way they could cover some of the more rural or sparsely populated areas.
Thank you,
That's
David.
it. Thank you.
Alex or Lynn?
Well,
Lynn, do you want to?
I do. Oh, go ahead.
No,
Go ahead,
I was going to say, go ahead.
Okay, so I do know that there is a shortage of ministers. So there's a lot of churches that would like a minister part-time, sometimes not even part-time, or there's congregations that would be willing to share ministers. I know that's becoming more popular. There's churches right here in Michigan near Detroit that are doing that right now. And so one Sunday, the minister is at one church and they Zoom in on the other church. And then the next week, she's at the other church and then they Zoom to the other church. So that's kind of how they handle theirs. But I think it's a proud tradition, circuit riders and Universalists in particular were really, I did a big project when I was in seminary on one of them was a Universalist. But anyway, they worked really hard and they traveled many miles. And I think that there is a great advantage that I have noticed, the fact that our congregation right now has 2 ministers that share a full-time position, because we go every other Sunday. So I preach one Sunday, Jerry preaches the next Sunday, then I preach, then he preaches. We have very different styles. We talk about different things. And we hear all the time that people really love that, because there's always going to be something that somebody likes, at least within a few weeks, right? You're not going to like every Sunday, but maybe you're going to, you'll find something. And I think, so I think it's great if people can share ministries, I've not heard the opposite way of, like, I usually hear about ministers sharing, like doing 2 churches or I even knew one who did 3 churches, but I love the idea of kind of switching it around where a minister goes, where, a few ministers kind of travel around and share, because I think that's only good for Unitarianism, right? I mean, because somebody's going to say something that's going to hit somebody in the heart that Sunday and say, that's what I needed to hear, right? So I think that would be wonderful I don't know how we would do it, but I think it's kind of a neat idea. If we could do that people would be willing to share ministries and, work more cooperatively. I think there are some ministers who probably would say, oh, I would never do that. I don't want to do that. I got to get to know my congregation and stuff. That doesn't, I think if you traveled between, 2 or 3 congregations in a month, I think you'd get to know a wide variety, especially in smaller congregations. And I think only the congregations would benefit. I think it would be good for everybody.
Okay, Alex, you have any thoughts on the question?
Well, I'm going to be brief because I see there are 3 hands up.
Yeah, there are 3 hands up.
When I go someplace, and I do go to different places all the time, invariably I get questions about, what do you think of this? Or what do you think of that? And that begins to blur over to the consulting role. And then, of course, that in turn goes to the money role, which, we all know. I think more often than not, congregations have these places where they kind of hit the wall. And it's like, okay, what do we do now? And maybe that's one of the things that the NAUA could possibly help with in terms of resources and specific individuals. Like, I have a lot of experience with addictions ministry. There might be places who need somebody to come in for a weekend and talk about that and do a Sunday service.
Right.
We all have so many different lay people and ministers alike. We have so many different skills.
Yep.
So I think that would be an advantage, especially for smaller outlying congregations.
So we're recording this and we'll make sure we capture some of these suggestions because they're great.
Yeah, that reminds me, Alex, of, how a lot of us do those skill and interest surveys when a person first, joins the congregation. You could even do that with some of our members at NAUA, ministers and lay people, and see what skills are out there. And I think we'd probably be surprised of the wealth of talent out there.
Thank you. One person who hasn't asked a question and is part of a startup is Gail. She's part of the Port Townsend startup. So I want to give her a chance and then I'll go to Danny.
Thank you, Sunil. You're doing a great job, and I'm very excited to hear this conversation. In fact, next, and then it's always a challenge when we have simultaneous workshops, because next is Niels. He'll be talking. He's our president of the Salish Sea Fellowship. And I have to say, we've operated 1 year. This was a breakaway congregation from Quimper, a very large congregation in Port Townsend. Our 1 year, and Alex came very recently. Wonderful job. People absolutely love him. And the person that we have, one person, he's on the board, Ron Strange, some of you know him. He is responsible for identifying speakers. Now, we do have a contract with Joseph Benarnik, and some of you may also know Joseph. He is more familiar in the Puget Sound area. He's not a minister. He's a lay speaker, but he is a philosophy major, very, very, very deep thinker, very resonant voice, and has the mannerism. So Joseph goes to our congregation, to Quimper, to Port Angeles, to Edmonds. He does the circuit. So what I'm suggesting, and I love all the ideas, because here's the opportunity. We have the talent. We just need the mechanism to get it organized. Because give us some relief. Give Ron a break. Have a pool of people that can come. People have to come to us. We rent a facility. We don't have high tech. People can Zoom in, but we can't Zoom in a speaker. So it's not that kind of facility. Alex was there. It's a Methodist church. It's a very nice facility, but and it has Zoom capabilities, but not to Zoom in a speaker and have an interactive engagement. So we have to bring people in. We're kind of isolated, but it would be nice if we had a pool of people that, whether the lay people, trained lay people, ministers, that could come in and give of course, as Alex suggested, a workshop, a sermon. That is wonderful, because I feel it is the essence of who we are when we go to service. We want to hear someone delivering a message, and ministers are trained at that. And yes, lay people can do it, and I gave, a couple of lay services, but I'm not a minister. I'm an academic, and that's my style. But I love the ideas, and I hope that we can, at least NAUA has the ideas to start putting this together, because we know the talent is there. We know the enthusiasm is there. It needs the organization. And I think, Lynn, hearing you're who we need. So thank you very much for what you're sharing. And of course, Alex, we need you because you're close by. You can come up and help us. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thank you, Gail. I'm going to go to Danny because that was more of a comment. I'd like to give Danny a chance to say what he has to say first. Go ahead, Danny. You can unmute yourself.
Yeah, I had trouble with that. Given our time constraint, I don't want to make an extensive comment, but instead I want to ask some questions, knowing this is going to be recorded, so that we can continue threads of discussion later. And one of the questions is this, after listening to things, and don't be offended, this is just a sort of devil's advocate thing, like some of the other things I brought up. Are only those judged by the minister and others healthy enough able to minister? And if this is our belief, is that belief ableist? What about the neurodiverse and others who tend to be excluded? Another one is, yes, we have lots of talent. Is that talent going to work primarily if it's logically organized, or is the lead in this dance inspiration, intuition, and creativity and innovation and passion before logic. And I'm done.
Thank you, Danny. We will record these questions and make sure that we consider them. Thank you for your input. Bruce, I'm going to give you a chance to speak now.
Yes, and real quickly, it looks like we are kind of wrapping up. I think one of the important issues, and one that I would have maybe should have brought up earlier, is how do we reach the nones, the non-affiliated? How do we reach the younger generations? My congregation, they got more gray hair than I do, and I got a lot. So how do we get out of this, of our age group, and how do we reach out to these younger generations, the Gen X and the millennials? They ain't showing up at any church.
Wonderful question. I'm going to let Alex go first this time.
That's a very good question, and thank you. It's been on my mind for quite a few years. One of the things I talked about at the State of Sea congregation a couple of weekends ago was that the people who are avoiding religious communities are the same people, generally speaking, who are looking for spiritual practices that help deepen their lives. Now, the word spiritual can be tweaky for some people. I just use the word relationship. That's it. How do we deepen our relationships with the world around us, with our families, with ourselves? And so what I encouraged them to do was to consider topics on Sundays that might bring people out of the woodwork. And one of them that we did in Meadville, Pennsylvania, is something called Shinrin-yoku, and it's forest bathing in Japanese.
Oh,
It's become a really major impetus here in the Western world. My partner, Deborah, is certified in it. And it's a way of, in a very simple manner, and it's a discipline too, to be able to go out into the woods, guided, and you spend an hour with no electronic media, and you take it all in. And then you have a picnic with 8 or 10 people with you. What did you experience? What did you learn? And Deborah came over to Meadville when I was still there in 2023. And I'd asked a group of students, I was teaching a course at the college there, Allegheny College, on meditation. And I asked her to come and do a session with the students there. And they're all very stressed out because they're all seniors and they're all doing comprehensive exams. And they came and it was a wonderful experience for most of them because they were able to get out of the rigidity and the logic and the rationality they were trapped in, to have at least something else to work with. And it's those kinds of things that I think, my guess is that a lot of people who are not within a religious community are seeking, but they don't know where to find it.
Lynn, your ideas?
Well, I would echo everything that Alex said. I love the idea of the forest bathing. I've heard a lot about it, and I think that's great. I think having things that offer more in the ways of spirituality that they keep telling, all the studies keep telling us that's what people are looking for. Meditation groups, yoga, talking about world religions is another way I think that we can bring younger people in. I also believe that trying to talk about subjects that are on people's mind, topics of the week or the month, seem to be important as well for younger people. They are people who are on social media and they are listening to the news and watching the news, and they want to hear what people think. And so I think having topics for discussion and things like that also bring younger folks together so that they can be with like-minded people and even maybe decide what should we do. I think there's a lot about action that they're looking for. Is what I know what's happening in the world now. What do I do? And I think that trying to find a way to get together with people to find something to take action with, I think is an important aspect of who we are.
Can I add two more things quickly?
Sure.
One is that Unitarianism in its default container talks a lot about rationality and logic and so on. And that's all wonderful, but I'm not sure that's the same interest that might have been 20, 30, 40 years ago. A lot more focus now is, again, how do we live in the world as it is? How do we be able to speak our mind without being shamed? And, how do we how do we create a family? How do we create a community and so on? And a lot of people, I think, are seeking that. The other thing that also comes to mind is that Sundays aren't that important for a lot of people. Soccer, going out, on a picnic or something, I don't know. But being able to move beyond Sunday, I think is a really important gesture to be able to have small groups. You remember small group ministry, being able to think, okay, what do we do outside of Sunday morning? And then having that available for people who might visit or might be curious online. Third and last thing, we are much more accustomed to using words in services. The newer generations are focused much more on visual aspects of being able to connect with the world. And so I think combining visual and auditory are really important. That's it.
Okay, thank you. I'm afraid we've had a great conversation, so thank you, everybody. We're going to have to shut down. I will say one thing, I love small group ministry. I think our circles, NAUA circles, are a great example of that. So thank you, everybody. I have to go to another session, so I do have to shut us down.
Fine, thank you.
Thanks, everyone.